All right. What is that? Must be a mole. It's a mole. I'm getting old. Fuck. Um, After a conversation I had with a friend today, I thought it might be neat to talk about why I stopped dealing with politics. Why I follow a little bit of it on Reddit, and I let myself get into a couple of videos in the morning to sort of see what's happening on the culture war front. But I don't get into it with my friends anymore, and I don't get into it with people anymore. Um, there was a time when I considered myself to be a staunch conservative in many ways. I guess for the record, I think that mostly socially I'm pretty liberal. I wouldn't say that I'm all the way to the left, but I'm certainly more left than your average conservative. But I also am for smaller government, less regulations, less taxes, more free market capitalism. That's my motto. I think what we have right now is not free market capitalism, and that's why it doesn't work. But regardless of that, the reason that I got out of politics is what I want to talk about. So it started with, it actually started last year, it started a while ago, and it was finding that I was getting overly frustrated every day with the news that I saw. I was a Trump supporter. I wouldn't say that I liked the guy, but I thought that of all the people that there were, and keep in mind I can't vote, so calling myself a supporter is kind of not really the thing. But I had my reasons for why I felt like he was the best pick for America. I felt like he had done some things that were positive for America. I felt like he was um, more dedicated towards the border security than the Democrats had been, despite that being an issue that they were big on, during the Obama years. And he had done things for small people. Controlling immigration helps low-income wage earners by keeping the wage and the cost for manual labor fixed, rather than having it slide off with the flood of people who come into the country who take up those jobs and who compete for those jobs. He was protecting low-income workers from their wages being reduced because of the influx of low labor. He made some really good inroads when it comes to making medications available to people and putting price caps on things like EpiPens and drugs for diabetic. I guess you'd say diabetic people. Um, and I tend to feel like if big pharma doesn't like someone, there's probably a good reason for that. And when I looked into it, it turns out that that was the reason why. He was good. He reinvested in the military, despite the fact that we'd all love for the world to not need militaries or guns or big missiles. Unfortunately, there are still countries out there that would like to do some harm. And despite the fact that wars aren't really being fought on the open fields anymore, that's no reason to not have at least at the very least the ability for a nation to defend itself. Um, Especially when it's the kind of nation that's had its fingers in some pies that it shouldn't have had it in. Now, I'm not. I would consider myself to be a patriot. I'm from New Zealand, but I believe in the greatness of America, and I believe in the greatness of Americans. But I'm not stupid, and I'm not blind. I can see that there's a lot of faults in the system, and there were a lot of faults in Trump and his administration. But regardless, I got frustrated with how one-sided the media coverage for his presidency had been. Even Fox News got on the bandwagon and whipped him plenty good at times. And people argue the point, well, if everyone hated him, why would you support him? I mean, isn't it obvious he was that bad? But pretty much fully one half of this country appreciated having someone in the White House who wasn't a politician, someone who wasn't a Washington insider, someone who hadn't come up through the political system accomplishing nothing, who then just sort of got into the White House as a result of the fact that they pulled the right levers and got down on their knees and said the right prayers. And he was an underdog in the election, and I'm a sucker for underdogs. I guess maybe more than anything, I'm a devil's advocate kind of guy. And that the way that he won and the fact that he won was so important. But again, getting back to the media, I was really unhappy with when I would go to the media to try to find objective, unbiased viewpoints or coverage of the things that he was accomplishing as a president. It was all just schlock pieces of crap reporting. It was, oh, he's mentally ill, or he's too old for this job, or, oh, look, he slipped on some stairs, or, oh, his wife is a slut and posed nude, or, any number of these other periphery issues. And what I started to notice was a pattern. It was a pattern, and the pattern that I use to refer to this is the beach ball pattern, where the media would wait for him to do something that they could latch onto and make a huge deal about. And you heard about it in podcasts, and you heard about it on Twitter, and you heard about it on Facebook, and liberals and Republicans or liberals and conservatives were fucking at each other about these stupid, pointless little things that were stupid and pointless. I mean, they were utterly worthless in terms of societal intellectual discussion. But people were latching onto them, and because the media was making such a huge deal out of it, they became the talking points for the nation, instead of, okay, but what has he done as president from an executive position, and are those things bad for the country? No one was asking those questions. None of those debates were happening. And where they were happening were these tiny little corners where there's like 10,000 people watching, and 150 likes. 10,000 intellects sit down and listen to an economist and a cultural analyst and a journalist talking about the different things that the Donald Trump administration had done that were good or bad for America. Those conversations weren't having. We were just constantly going on about Orange Man bad. Oh, he's a Nazi, he's this, he supports white supremacists, he's a racist. And even the people who thought that they were digging up evidence for any of the things that he did that were wrong, whenever we found out that it was untrue, the media would just pivot and shine a spotlight through another fucking bullshit story that got Republicans and liberals at each other's throats again. And I realized that it was just beach ball bullshit. It was just topics and things that they threw up in the air, and then the rest of us ran around going, oh, beach ball, bong. Oh shit, there's a big ball, bong. And that's all we did. And we didn't notice that the beach was getting vacuumed out from underneath us. We weren't paying attention to the real issues. The fact that we have subsidized capitalism, which doesn't work. The fact that we have life-term politicians whose grift is essentially to get in those positions and then never leave. As much as possible, never leave. Nancy Pelosi's been in her job for 40 years. And what has she really accomplished? For all of her statesmanship, whenever I see her talk, she seems confused most of the time. People like Maxine Waters have used racial animus to get elected and then done nothing for her constituency. Mitch McConnell has been in his position for fucking 40 some or 30 whatever years. What's he done for Kentucky? I mean, really, the fact that these people don't have a limit to the amount of time that they're in, mind-boggling. The fact that there were still US troops in countries that didn't want them there, and people that didn't want their help. Admittedly, there's some people in those places that do want our help, but not our help in terms of, hey, let's have a bunch of A-10s do flybys and bomb the area. We've got cybersecurity as an issue in this country. We have hackers from other from other countries trying to hack into our financial systems. I mean, there's so many problems going on in the world that are legitimate problems, and yet all we were hearing about was Orange Man bad and these beach ball issues. And for people who were, because I was into gaming at the time, people who were into games and who were into that sort of culture, it was the same thing on a smaller scale. And rather than dealing with the fact that and this is where I like some of these journalists, guys like Jim Sterling, for example. I really liked that he covered a lot of the, what do they call it, the crunch stuff in video game development, how these people were being asked to work, 16-hour days for fucking weeks at a time, and they weren't getting to see their families, and they were getting burned out and underpaid. But all we could ever talk about was Anita Sarkeesian, this worthless female nothing burger. No one could switch it off, and so we just kept focusing on these pointless issues, and I saw the same thing happening in politics. And it was frustrating me, and more and more and more, and I would get into fights, not fist fights, but I would get into verbal fights and arguments with my friends about the issues, and more often than not, we would come to the realization that we had a lot of the same outcome, like desired outcomes. It was just how we got there that was different. And that made me realize that paying attention to all of this wasn't doing me any good. But it wasn't until later on that I started interacting with these friends more. And admittedly, bringing in some other philosophies into my life. The prior to quitting marijuana and quitting video games, I had decided that I was going to cut off from politics and not talk about it anymore, and if it came up during the time that I was hanging out with friends, that I would be vocal about saying, look, I'm not interested in talking about politics. I don't mind talking about ideas, but I'm not going to talk about politics. This system is disgusting, and I'm not going to get into politics, so I don't feel like I'm going to change anything. But more and more I started to come around to the idea that changing myself was the key. Because I don't have any control over Pelosi or Maxine Waters. I don't live in their constituencies. I can't run against them. I can't do anything about those people. But like I said in my responsibility video, the one thing that you can control is yourself. The one thing you can change about the world is you. And there are ways to look at the way that you're interacting with the world and figure out what you're doing that isn't working. And that's what I did. I started to realize that my interacting with the news and getting frustrated by all this stuff was, I was doing what they wanted me to do. Read, get angry, interact, give them clicks. So I said, fuck it. I'm not going to do that anymore. And I'm not going to I'm not going to do it with my friends. I'm not going to give them the satisfaction of being that person. And instead, I'm going to fix my own problems. And I'm going to fix my own damn life. And I'm going to set an example for the people around me that I believe would be the example that would work for me if I was struggling. So I'm going to show up when I say I'm going to show up, and I'm going to show up on time. I'm not going to waste any of my friends' time. I'm going to be honest with them about things. I'm going to tell them how I feel about things, and when they ask me questions, I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to lie to them. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm just going to be honest. I'm going to give them value back. I'm not going to take from them only. I'm going to make sure that I'm happy with the amount that I'm investing into these relationships. And for myself, I'm going to get back into fitness, and I'm going to do it 4 or 5 times a week, no matter what. Even if it's just 20 minutes, even if it's just a quick AMRAP or an EMOM or something. I'm going to do 20 minutes of exercise minimum 4 or 5 times a week. And I got back into rugby refereeing because I wanted to do something that was challenging to me, that can be a real hit to your ego when you have a bad game. It can really lay you low. And giving up video games so that I was able to show up to work and actually do my best at work and give my best to the company that hired me. So I stopped. And what I noticed was that immediately my life got better. I stopped being so angry all the time, and I stopped trying to argue or looking for ways to have those arguments with the people that I know. And when those subjects came up with friends, I would just say, I don't want to talk about this. There's 1,000,001 other things that I would much rather talk about than whether or not Kamala Harris would make a good president. I want to say it, but I'm not gonna. And as a result, the people around me stopped talking about those things as well. Admittedly, some of them didn't. Some of them continue, and those people I feel like are slowly but surely sort of falling off the waysides. But I find also that now I'm starting to look at people not from a political lens anymore either. I'm starting to look at people with the nuances that they all have. You know, everybody who claims to be a liberal, I guarantee you, if you ask them enough questions, you'll find something that they lean conservatively on. And every conservative that you know, there's probably some issue that they are actually quite liberal on. So finding people and meeting people and getting to know people and then figuring out the nuances and their flaws has become more important to me and more interesting to me than giving a shit about their politics. And this has been so rewarding that I haven't had any issues with leaving politics behind and not caring so much about what's going on in the White House. Yes, absolutely the system is broken, but until the American people start to call en masse in a regular way and demand for change, the number one change I believe needs to be term limits. For senators and for Congress people, there needs to be a term limit, period. There's one for the president. And I think maybe not so much for the Supreme Court. I think it's useful to have the experience and the knowledge gained sort of build up over the years of service in that, and we need people who have invested time into those places. But I think politics in today's age needs to be faster adapting to the changing ways that our cities and our states are being run, and you can see it again in a lot of ways with conservative states. And I believe in the next couple of years you'll see more of it where young conservatives step up and primary out the older conservatives because they're actually going to give a shit about the issues that young conservatives care about. As we've seen with the Democrats and the Liberals more recently, you know, with sort of their influx of younger people coming in and doing work. Now, that's my main reason for getting out of politics and what I did differently and how it's made me, I feel like it's made me a better person. What I will say, Republicans, if one motherfucker of you is watching, anyone who has anything to do with the next presidential election, Latino woman, born, whether it's Central American, that's part of the United States or whatever, not super young but young enough, clearly a woman of color, successful, charismatic, knows how to talk, and is a clean person. And when I say clean, I mean she doesn't have any fucking scandals or any videos of her talking about how she's going to grab men by the cock or anything like that. Get that woman and put her as the goddamn front runner for the Republican Party for the next presidential election, so that you can claim consistent fucking history with your past as a party, right? The Emancipation Party. We got the first woman of color that was ever elected. We got the first woman that was ever elected. Sorry, let me rephrase. We got the first woman, we got the first woman of color, and she's the daughter of immigrants from a Central American country that is like a United States territory or whatever. And she's a Republican. Not a Democrat, a Republican. If you want to win the presidential election, that's how you do it, hands down. If that doesn't work, or if you can't find someone like that, then I would say probably a conservative black woman will fill the shoes beautifully. Stop putting up milk toast fucking dickheads who sound mealy-mouthed and completely vaginarized. People want leaders to follow. They don't want sopping, soggy biscuit dudes. Or women, for that matter. They want strong leadership. And if you were able to claim the first woman person of color to ever be elected to the President of the United States, I mean, who the fuck isn't going to go? Who's going to vote for that? Outside of the ideologues. And let's be fair, the ideologues are in the minority. Trump had a good run. In his 4 years, he did some shit. He did. And he's got some claims to some of the biggest numbers and some of the biggest positive numbers during his presidency. But I don't think the populist way is the way to go. And I think what the Republican Party needs to do is embrace the minorities who are conservatives and who are patriotic, immigrants who are patriotic about this country because they moved here, they got here, and now they work and live here, like me. Don't vote for me. And for fuck, I would never. I mean, obviously, you can't vote for me anyway. I'm not a naturalized citizen. I wasn't born here. But immigrants like me are patriotic. We give a shit about the country. And we give a shit about the values, the reasons why we moved here. There are inherent values in the United States that its own citizens are blind to much of the time. It still surprises me to this day how few Americans I meet who are genuinely patriotic in the cities, particularly the ones who are moderate or Democrat or left-leaning. All they ever see is the bad stuff, and they don't ever think about the good stuff or don't ever acknowledge the good stuff, and that it hurts because there's so much good. Anyway, so like I said, Republicans, if you want to win, female of color, that's your fucking ticket. Yeah, that's no. I'm standing by it. I don't think it's racist to say that, and I think that is the winning ticket. When you look at the Cuban Americans, they are all vastly more Republican or conservative leaning, and I think you could get a candidate from that batch who would be strong, effective, and present a much rosier picture for the Republican Party than another milquetoast, chinless white dude. And I'm saying that as someone who has a chin. Anyway, that's it for me. Hope you enjoyed it. Ka kite.